Welcome to the Blacksmith Chronicles podcast, the official podcast of Ryan Janssen Ministries. This podcast was created for the purpose of equipping others for the advancement of the kingdom of God. We hope that you enjoy this episode and encourage you to subscribe to the Blacksmith Chronicles today. For more information about Ryan Janssen Ministries, please visit www.ryanjohnson.us or email us directly at info@ryanjohnson.us.
Hey guys, welcome to the Blacksmith Chronicles podcast. I'm excited this week to be able to welcome multiple guests. Again, we get to have a roundtable conversation, but this one is unique. This one is very special and important because of developing the relationship in the midst of everything else that is happening and how all these different individuals can coexist and learn how to grow, learn how to challenge, learn how to equip one another. And still, at the end of the day, even with disagreements, potentially like one another. We all love people, but let's be honest. Everybody often aren't in a position of being liked from time to time. We have our moments where we get frustrated or get aggravated or whatever, but that challenge and that growth, even in backgrounds that are unique and personalities that are unique, how do we stay together? How do we co-labor? How do we grow and advance the kingdom in all this? So without further ado, I'm going to welcome multiple guests, and we'll get started with our first one, Mr. Putty Putnam. Sir, it is so good to have you here on the Blacksmith Chronicles podcast. Would you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. And I know I can speak for all of us when we say we're thrilled to be here. And, the complimentary sword that you're offering us is well received. It's well worth our time. No, I'm just kidding. But if you have one, we'd like that. That'd be cool. But yeah, no, my name is Putty, or at least that's what I go by. It's a long story, kind of a Lord story, which maybe we can get into later. I am living in Champaign, Illinois, which is in central Illinois. We're all kind of in that area. I am a husband of approaching 15 years in this next month. I've got 3 kids who are 8, 7, and 4, and we're in the process of adopting. So hoping to add one more as we go here sometime in the near future. We'll see. I get to do a lot of different things. I work for a church kind of in some weird combination role that is partly pastoring, partly entrepreneuring, partly speaking, partly writing. And one of the more interesting and unique things, I suppose, about me is that I was going to be a scientist. I have a PhD in physics, believe it or not. And in the midst of that was when the Lord called me to ministry. And so I'm sort of a physicist trapped in a pastor's body, doing whatever it is that I'm doing.
Who wants to go next? Go ahead, Daniel.
Hey, everyone. Again, thanks, Ryan. Love being here. My name is Daniel Putman. I'm actually Putty Putman's younger brother. It's awesome. I guess a little bit about me. I actually work for the organization that Putty directs and stuff. So he is technically also my boss at the same time as my older brother. And I am also in a unique position like Putty, where I also work for a church as well. So I'm actually the Healing Ministries pastor. My job is actually a little bit more on kind of the teaching end. I do some kind of program leading. I also just kind of get really into the gritty stuff. I have a huge passion for like deliverance ministry and stuff like that. So I do that, a fair amount of prophetic ministry and stuff. So I do that. That's kind of what my job looks like. I am married and have been for about 2 years. And then I'll probably have my first baby or my first child in about 2 months or so. That's about as far along as my wife.
Congratulations.
Is. Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm excited. It's going to be great. So yeah, I do that. Interestingly enough, I actually also even though it sounds like we have this weird, totally absorbed relationship with my brother, I actually live about a 5-minute walk from him too. So we're close. We share a lot of space. I actually do not see him a ton at work. So like, it's not like we just like don't get this weird picture that we do absolutely every moment together. I actually don't see him at work a lot. Yeah. So I do that. Let's see. I worked a ton of different jobs. I was actually a child. I like was one of these guys where every 2 weeks I wanted to have just a completely different career. I could never decide on what I wanted to do. So I just picked the most ambiguous thing ever in college. I picked philosophy, because I could never decide on anything. So I was like, well, I'll get really good at asking questions. Maybe that will help me find a career. And it didn't, because I went straight to Starbucks afterwards. But so that was my life. I bobbled around for a while. And then eventually I really found what ministry could be. I was wrong about what I thought it would be. Once I saw what it could be, I really got excited about it. So eventually I pursued that direction, became hired on staff. And I've been on staff for about 7 years now.
Awesome. How about Tim?
All right, I'll go. Great to be here. Ryan, thanks for having us on. There's a whole lot of things I guess I could talk about myself, so it's hard for me to pick out like what's relevant. I guess I'll just start with some family background. Grew up in a Christian home, and when I was growing up, my dad took us to a lot of different churches. He was kind of searching for his kind of the place where he would connect, and so a lot of my growing up years were kind of marked by experiencing a really wide range of what the church could look like in different expressions all across the board, from charismatic to the Baptist to even the slightly cultish, and that's a whole other story. So a lot of experience there. I met these guys super young. Andrew, when I was first born, my parents were part of a community church, and Andrew's parents were also part of that church as well. So I actually don't have any memories of my life before I met Andrew. I don't remember meeting him. I just always knew him. Kind of always been there. Can't get rid of him. I have tried. But I don't think that's going to happen at this point. And then, I eventually met Putty and Dan probably in early junior high or somewhere around there. So we all became friends and been together ever since there. Career-wise, kind of a similar story to Dan's. There's no real discernible thread in all the different jobs that I've had, or any clear path, and that's basically because I've never had a clear idea what I was doing. For all kinds of interesting stories there. Bobbled around for a while as well, until 4 years ago, like Putty mentioned, School of Kingdom Ministry was growing to a point where we were running classes all over the country, even internationally at that point, and we kind of needed someone to be a connection point between us and all of the churches that were running this class. And my personality gifting set is kind of such that I'm very good with customer service type roles, very good with making people comfortable. Ryan actually resonated a lot with kind of what you were talking about earlier, which is I love the authentic. I cannot stand faking anything. I would rather you just, if you have a problem with me, I would rather you tell me as bluntly as possible, as opposed to beating around the bush or pretending like it's not there. I can't stand any of that stuff. So I love people. I love creating safe environments for people and for relationships as well. So the job really fit really well. So Putty hired me onto the team, and it was fairly simple. Got to work on his team full time, and it's pretty much been a blast in a lot of ways. I mean, at that time, Dan and Andrew were already involved, and so like I got hired on to do a job where I was sitting next to my three best friends since I've been a kid, and so sometimes it's hard to call it work. Half the time for me, it's more like playtime.
There are legit Nerf wars that happen, like legitimate 20-minute long.
Yeah.
The rest of the church can't stand us, I think. Like, they actually get annoyed, but we love it. We go for it, man.
We have flooded the halls with Nerf darts and running and screaming. And I made it my personal mission, just because ministry can be a very high-stress environment. I made it my personal mission to make sure that nobody ever takes anything too seriously, because I think that's really important. And so making the humorous observations and making light of every situation as much as possible is one of my life goals, and I think talents as well. So
I love it. How about Andrew?
It's a great summary. It's always good to meet your friends again for the first time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan, for having us here. This is just a really cool opportunity. My name is Andrew. I'm 36. I also married, have no kids here at home. One fun thing about me is that I speak French, and we actually speak French at home. I met my wife in Paris, France, during a sort of mission trip.
Wow.
These guys, I think, have given a bunch of details about sort of how we met. Maybe we'll get into that more later. Career-wise, I've probably had a slightly more coherent career than the other three, but only just a bit. I guess I'm the pure technologist of the group.
More coherence.
Only slightly.
Never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been doing computer stuff since I was, I think, 11 years old. So that was 25 years ago. I'm not sure if I'm much better than I was at the time, perhaps slightly better. I have been through small companies and big companies and startups and everything in between. I've spent time at Facebook and at Google on the West Coast. I've been I'm the sort of person who drifts from location to location as much as I'm able to. So with these other guys, I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, then came down here to Champaign-Urbana. I got away and moved to France for a while. Came back here with my new wife to Urbana, moved out to California to do Facebook and Google, and moved back here again. So I think probably close to the core of who I am is a traveler. Unfortunately, one who does not travel that much, but that's kind of close to the roots of that's just something I really resonate with. Something else that I definitely should mention, because I'm on this podcast, is that my grandfather actually was a blacksmith.
Oh.
So his garage and his house full of all sorts of stuff. I actually had a cool trip with him in 2017, where I actually was able to go to a legit old school blacksmith garage. And he just lit up and picked up hammers and tongs and there were real billows there. It was a really exciting thing. So I don't know the first thing about that, but at least it's in my family somewhere.
That's pretty. I just got the first question for Andrew here. How did you convince someone from Paris, France to move to Illinois? I mean,
that is not the first time I've been asked that question.
Of all the places in Illinois. No, guys, I love Illinois. So no.
We ask that question to everybody. Every time I meet someone, I'm just like, so how did this happen to you? How did you end up here in Central Illinois? So
listening to you guys' story, I feel like I am about to embark on this journey of a wonderful conversation with the Illinois version / the Christian version / of the Impractical Jokers. 4 lifelong friends who grew up together, now serving God together, and in the midst of Nerf wars together, So it's a unique bunch here, but there is something very, very beautiful about this. Is each of you talk about the fact that you have known each other for so long, and these relationships, of course, with Putty and Daniel, they've got that unique history. I'm always amazed when family can actually coexist in a work environment together. I love my siblings, but I'm not sure that I could do it. And not so much maybe that I could work with them. I don't know that they could work with me, just to be real about it. So I'm always amazed when family coexists with one another like that. But then you throw in friends who that's another level. Because people often become friends, but they have those Paul and Barnabas moments where they butt heads and they have really difficult disagreements, but everybody doesn't end up like a Paul and Barnabas. Paul and Barnabas eventually, after this detrimental disagreement, they eventually do come back together and co-labor with one another. But there's this degree of separation. Then you throw on top of this, I mean, my gosh, Putty, a scientist, physics. My first, when you're just talking, Putty, I'm speaking way out of the box here, because forgive me, guys, my education came from the state of Alabama, so I don't have a whole lot to validate in this conversation. But all I can think of is Sam from Quantum Leap. I mean, is that something like that? I mean, is that? I mean, are you the real life Sam Beckett from Quantum Leap?
I'm a little fuzzy on Quantum Leap, so we'll just say yes, because I think what you're thinking is impressive. So we'll say yes.
Oh, I'm showing my age right here. So I'm not that much older than you guys. Come on. But I love the fact that Daniel said, I didn't know what I was going to be, so I just chose philosophy. Just like a random dartboard thought process here. But obviously each one of you have this background where not only serving the Lord is a spiritual thing, but there's a practical thing. You're very intelligent, very gifted in other areas beyond the spiritual side of ministry and stuff. So how does this dynamic of friends, family, and super, super intelligent, how does that co-labor with one another in church world? I mean, it's one thing if you guys were all in a law firm or all in a computer business, we could see that unfold in a different manner. But we're talking about bringing something to the table in church culture, where, let's be honest about it, the church culture is a totally different level of understanding and operating. If you're a congregant, many times they think the pastor doesn't do anything. A lot of people in church, the pastor doesn't work. He's got plenty of time. But there's the hard hours. And then, of course, with Daniel in his area of ministry, there's people that's going to be speculations of that, so on and so forth. And then, you have all this. I know this is a loaded question, but how do you guys take all that and put it into functioning and operating a modern church? Not all at once.
Well, I suppose I'll throw an idea out there. I'm sure there'll be a lot more. This isn't the whole thing. I'm sure There's a lot of other pieces. But I think one of the things that I think is important for the four of us is something that I think Tim actually hinted at with our Nerf gun wars. I think in some way we've never really said this to one another, but I think we all sort of decided we didn't want to fully grow up, and that our relationships really is I still sort of feel like we're all in 8th grade together. The rest of the world is grown up, but the thing that we're doing together is actually still very much in that space. And I think that could be looked at as a few ways. That could be seen as a really negative thing, as an immaturity, but I think it's actually something that's more in that childlikeness of the kingdom place. What we all do is actually pretty intense when you look at it and you think about it. Dan talked about healing ministry and deliverance, and we do stuff that involves global releasing of supernatural power and events, and you can't get into that without getting into the most intense parts of people's lives and It's it's big, it's intense, it's whatever. But I think the thing that really works and clicks with us is that for all of us, we're all oh yeah, that's just what we do. That's actually the side thing. The thing that's really great is that we have each other, and that we're having a total blast doing this. And if you're going to come to me and you want me to pray for you, or Dan to pray for you, or Tim or Andrew to pray for you, you'll come to me and you'll be pray for me. I have this ridiculous pornography addiction and I'm filled with shame and it's terrible. It'll be this heavy thing. And I guarantee you, there's going to be laughter in the midst of that prayer encounter. Why? Because we're still in 8th grade. I kind of don't know how to do anything else. And I don't really want to do anything else. There's a part of preserving like the fun, the joy, the innocence, the hopefulness, the anticipation of what life has to offer ahead. Like that, I think, is sort of like the foundation of the four of our relationship. And so like that's what exists in the culture among us. And what happens then is that like people like intersect this thing and they don't know what to do with it, because it's like, I'm jaded, or I'm hurt, or I just don't think life is supposed to be lighthearted and fun, or, you know, all of these things. So they intersect it and it breaks their head and they're like, I don't know what to do this. And then in that reeling space, it's like God jumps on them and starts doing something amazing. And then they're like, holy cow, this is unbelievable. God's so fantastic. We're like, I know, come to the party, you know? So I think that's a piece of it. At least it feels like a piece of it for me, but I'm sure these guys have other great parts to offer as well.
Yeah, another piece that I would add is something I've noticed that runs back as far as I can remember with this group of people. And I don't know if it's all just our personalities together, or I think there is kind of some spiritual grace on it as well. But our ability to not be competitive with each other is really strong. And you can see this even in a lot of the things we do recreationally. Like we tend to gravitate towards games where we can all be on the same team and fight something outside of us. And we tend to not like to have to be individuals like competing against one another. And so I think that has always really like predisposed us to teamwork. It's always really predisposed us to always kind of like be able to set aside the ego, set aside the personal ambition kind of side, and always like, how do we work together to accomplish the goal that's outside of any individual person? And I think that's been a huge strength in what we've done.
I think something that, just kind of that I want to comment with Tim that went really far back is like, I'm actually like, all of these guys did actually phenomenal, just testing wise in their ACTs and stuff like that. Putty, I think you got a 34. Tim, I know you showed up sick and you got like a 31 and like on your first time. Like Andrew, you got like a 32, I think. You were higher up there, higher 30s. I have dyslexia. I walked out with a 31 a 21, and I got to spend as much time as I could. So we're all really smart guys. But one of the things that happened, I think, to us, and I don't know how this happened. Like, I get why it happened to me and Putty. Like, both me and Putty were actually missionary kids. Our parents took us to China for a year. So I actually, when I was 5 to 6, I grew up in China. Putty, I think you were 6 to 7, I believe.
Yeah, it's somewhere in there. Yeah,
something like that. And I mean, it was China in 1990. Like it was a second world country. Like I remember like the coal cart drive up and unload the pile of coal, and people would burn that to keep their houses clean. Like it was completely different in America. And I mean, it absolutely changed both me and my brother. Like I remember it was actually harder to come back to the US because I went straight into grade school. And I remember like kids making jokes about like TV and stuff like that. And I was like, I haven't watched a TV in a year. Like, I don't even know why that's funny. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And, I mean, like, I remember we used to walk to the street and stuff like that. I remember that. I mean, it wasn't uncommon for me to see like a guy that was so poor that he was next to a cardboard box. He was missing a leg and he had a bowl in front of him. And that was his life. Like if he didn't get money in that bowl, there was no net for that guy. Mm-hmm. And so, you see this stuff at 5, it really changes you. And then you come back into an American culture. And it was just really hard. I remember both me and Putty, we probably couldn't have said it, but we almost had this sort of like we almost kind of felt like outsiders to American culture. And I don't know how much that resonates with Andrew and Tim. I know we're both really intelligent, but like between me and Putty, we've had a close connection our entire life. I've wondered if that was it, because Putty's the only guy who knows what it was like, to come back and to be like me. I think in a way, I don't know, Andrew and Tim, if you guys kind of feel in your own way, maybe a little bit like you've been kind of an outsider of American culture, but I've just always felt like they are my team. I am on this team. These people get me. We find the same things funny. We have the same heart on things. And to me, it's like, I don't care what church turns into. Like, this is my team. Like, I would never leave my team, you know? And I think we've brought that deep friendship, that connection. I also think these are probably the funniest people I've met in my life too. That humor, you know, just you've got decades worth of inside jokes, you know, where, I mean, like, we don't, you know, you could just make like reference a tiny point from like a video game that we played 20 years ago that we thought was hilarious and we're all laughing. I mean, that's how much momentum we have in our relationship. So like, we just know, like, to me, like, nothing is worth breaking this. This is, you know, this is the team I'm on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if I was going to add one thing, I would just say that it's probably true that not too many, you know, groups of four friends like last this long in life together. But I think that one thing that's made it work for us, and this ties back to everything that the others have said, is the way that we understand ourselves, not just friends, but like we've defined ourselves as family. Mm-hmm. And so that also is like why we're not competitive, you know, because at the basis, really we don't view ourselves as what we're doing or what we can do, our skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just don't think that many people have the insight. Like, I certainly didn't. It wasn't me who came up with this idea, but like defining your friend group as a family is not something that just happens accidentally.
Mm.
Yeah.
There's if I can just kind of piggyback off you, Andrew, there, you know, one piece that comes along with that none of us brought up, but is, I think, something we all carry very deeply is, because of the value of our relationships, we are incredibly intentional about them. You know, like, our life has changed massively since, you know, the 8th grade or whatever. You know, Tim, I don't remember if Tim mentioned it, but we're all married, you know, so we all have like our own families. You know, and, you know, Andrew's, you know, wife is from Paris, you know, so like, that's not exactly the same thing as, you know, like, there's, you know, that could be a big tension, I suppose, between us, that could move us in different directions. But we're very purposeful about the way that we cultivate our family, and we have been for a long time. And in fact, it's not even just with us. This is probably like a core layer. There's layers sort of beyond us that we're also deeply intentional about. We have a kind of an extension of our group growing up. Some of them are up in the Chicago area, which is about 2 hours away, give or take. And about every 3 months they come down and we all spend an entire weekend together. And we've been doing that for what, a decade?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know anyone else who has that level of intentionality with the second tier of their relationships, right? So like, that's not the intentionality we have with the four of us. That's the second tier. And so there's a lot of like, and it's not a weird intentionality. Sometimes there's this thing where it's like, well, you're committed to your family, right? Like, for us, we're just like, no, man, like, this is such a life-giving, good, healthy, beautiful thing. Like, I don't know what I could trade for this that wouldn't be a massive loss. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a really unique dynamic because, like you mentioned, you know, the four of you guys being friends is one thing, but the minute you bring a spouse in, this can be a very challenging situation because, you know, you may not like this person's spouse or struggle personality-wise with it, but then, you know, culturally, when you bring Andrew's spouse in, there's a lot of culture barriers that you have to overcome in order to make it work. Then you carry the other layer of kids. You know, we all love our kids. Other people's kids can challenge us from time to time. So these are things that you definitely have to work with. And it's beautiful to hear this story of how you guys are coexisting in that. I wonder, though, you know, working in ministry, you understand one another. I love that you said that we don't compete with one another. I think one of the greatest threats to modern American Christianity is competition, the drive to outdo the next, you know, person in the pulpit or whatever. But you carry this into this kind of relationship. You know, we love to laugh. We have joy. We love each other's company. Occasionally we break out in these, you know, Nerf wars and video games and all this stuff. But how do you face the people in a congregation that have predetermined American Christianity mindsets? A pastor should be this way, a associate pastor this way or that. And they have these mindsets that are predetermined, and they come into a congregation, and the minute that you guys don't act like, look like, or function anything like the pastoral idea of an American Christian, how do you teach people that what we do and who we are is authentic? And that's the thing that we got to learn to embrace about people. How does that work?
Well, I got something that just came to mind, so I'll jump in, but I'm sure everybody else has awesome stuff to add. One thing that's interesting is I have never had someone who has seen the four of us and our relationships up close that has expressed a sentiment about those relationships that was not, what you guys have is amazing, and I wish I had that in my life. I've never heard anything other than that about our relationships. And so I think what happens is people kind of like experience a sort of a bit of a push-pull. So like they get close and they're like, this isn't what I think it should be. I'm confused. And they sort of like want to back up. But then at the same time, they see what we're experiencing and they're like, that's the thing I've really been wanting my whole life. So it's like, it actually puts people kind of in this place of choice, actually. And I think some people, they're like, I don't think I can make that shift, and they do. And they just sort of like, go do something else and whatever. And that's fine. Like, I don't feel the need to minister to everyone. Like, like I'm not the savior, like Jesus is. So like, I'm only called to work with the people God's, moving me towards. So some people do distance away, but what happens to a whole lot of people is they go, well, this doesn't make sense to me, but I'm going to take a step towards it because I can feel how good it is. And so I'm going to step towards the goodness. And then in the middle of that, things kind of begin to awaken a little bit. They begin to sort of come alive a little bit. I think for me, my take on like ministry might be a little different than most people. Like I'm like, dude, I'm on an adventure. Like that's what I'm doing. Like if you want to come on the adventure, then let's come on the adventure. And what's going to happen is like Jesus is going to take amazing care of you on the adventure. But what's not going to happen is I'm not going to take amazing care of you. I'll invite you. Like, I'm just being real. Like, well, first of all, personality wise, like I just can't do it. But secondly, like,
it's true. I've been on that journey.
Tim knows it. But secondly, I mean, I see so many church leaders that are confused about their responsibility. Like, our responsibility is not to carry other people. Like, I will welcome anyone. But like, I'm following him. Like, if you want to follow me, then you've missed it. Like, and I'm looking at him. And if you want to look at me for something, then I'm gonna point you to him. Like, he's what's great. I'm not that great. Like, I'm weird. I'm still a physicist that got confused and somehow wound up not getting paid right. Like, there's not much here, And so what winds up happening is, all of these things like weave together. The culture of family among us, which I think what we really carry is I think we carry just a little bit of what Jesus talked about that one time when his family comes to him and is like, hey, you're going to be the responsible older brother, right? And he says, actually, who's my mother? Who's my sister? Who's my brother? It's the people who are doing the will of God. And I think in that what he's saying is that like there is a family that is a family around God's will and God's heart that actually transcends a biological family. I think that's actually the nugget that we carry. I think that's the thing that lives among us a little bit. And so on one side, it just sounds like, oh, we've all been friends forever and we have 3 decades worth of inside jokes, which is true, you know? But I think that that's actually just the outworking of a grace. And the real grace of it is that, like, the kingdom is a family, and that in that family, actually, everybody is super welcome, as long as, like, the stuff that you're talking about, like, as long as you're real, as long as you're willing to not compete, as long as you're willing to allow yourself to be that 8th grader with each other, you know, like that, everyone's invited to that family. And as soon as you start stepping into it, then you're like, oh, God's here and God is bringing us on this great adventure. Like, holy cow, this is cool. So I don't remember where I started. I've rambled too long. I recuse myself. I'm done.
Well, here's the thing that really just, I can kind of hear how some people, let me play devil's advocate here just for a second. Let me put it that way. You have this unique relationship that has granted you this opportunity to co-labor with one another beyond the friendship and into ministry. I can hear the religious zealot say, well, every blind squirrel once in a while finds an acorn, you know, and they say, well, here are these guys, they're potentially immature, they goof off, they play video games,
we're definitely immature.
Yeah.
Just accept that one right now.
They have all this stuff, you know, the Pharisaical mindset, and they go, well, they're bound to stumble on something ministry-wise and accomplish something. So what I want to ask you is, what is it that you guys have really put into motion, strategy-wise for the church, whether it's school, whether it is outreach ministry, deliverance and healing ministry? What is it beyond all that? Because, you know, I say this with a kind heart for everybody listening and watching, but there's nothing more than what I love is to see a religious individual who has their mind predetermined how things should function, to be shocked and silenced when people are effective through the authenticity of who they are in serving God. So I'd like to ask you guys, what is it that you guys are implementing? And you're not just going to church, you're not just showing up and occasionally getting lucky and doing things by chance. What's some of the things that you're doing to advance the kingdom?
I've talked a lot, so I'll say I could go.
Well,
I could talk first. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I'll just kick it off, because I know that one of the biggest things that I've seen us begin to set in motion, and you know, probably the thing that's dearest to my heart, is just and I see this as kind of an extension of the way that we relate to one another. But this idea that, you know, Putty coined it as the Interdependent Church. And some of the fruit of what we've seen in our ministry is churches that are all across the nation becoming more collaborative, beginning to build relationships with one another, where, you know, it's not just these silos, these local churches, and everyone's doing their own thing. But we're starting to come together and sort of realize that if we share with one another what we have, everyone's strong in different ways, and the Big C church can build itself up in a lot of really powerful ways once we start thinking of ourselves as part of the Big C church and not just individual churches. And we've seen that start, in School of Kingdom Ministries. It's been amazing to see how it just created this network where even that feel of family relationship, it permeates this network. People just can meet other people who are part of School of Kingdom Ministry, and it's just this instant connection, instant relatability. When people come together for conferences, it's you get the Stockholm people together, and it's instant family. And it's amazing. And we've seen other groups of churches in other regions initially form connections because of Stockholm, and then they start to pool their resources together. They start to get together, put their heads together, create events, that multiple churches are kind of investing in and sending people to help out with. So that to me is a big one. It's kind of this taking the independent siloed churches and starting to connect them and seeing like what can we build together as a big C church.
Yeah, different people I think are gonna respond to different kinds of fruit, I suppose. Some people want what's the quality of the relationships. Some people are like, give me numbers. It's sort of all over the place. So I'll add something that's more from the numbers side because I think I've got that fresh. So School of Kingdom Ministry is a Holy Spirit training and equipping program that basically Andrew and I founded out of a small group a little more than a decade ago. It became an official thing probably like 2012, 2013, something like that. In the time since then, we've run it at over 200 churches. There's been over 7,000 students that have gone through it. The majority of them tell me things like, this is the most significant spiritual thing that has ever happened in my life. We've had countless people get released into becoming pastors or raised up to church plants. I've had so many leaders tell me, I was on the edge. I was about to close my church. And then we took School of Kingdom Ministry and you saved my ministry. I've had people tell me that it saved their life. It is probably the leading edge for healing and deliverance and signs and wonders within the Vineyard movement. It has been significant here. Now it's actually beginning to catalyze entire denominations and countries at this point in terms of a move of the Spirit that's happening. If you're looking for the numbers, and this is the side that like I don't usually say, I'm like, look, I'm having fun, and the fruit will speak for itself. I know most of the people that aren't listening can't hear the fruit. They won't see the fruit. You don't come to my local church. That's fine. But I might dare say that Dan's probably driven out more leaders than half the pastors in the Vineyard added together.
Driven out more demons, not more leaders.
Sorry. Yep. I got that wrong. Thank you. I
just wanted to make sure that got clarified before it got broadcast.
I kind of was going with it. I mean, I've met some of those leaders. It's like, if you're looking for the numbers, like there's just this trail of massive Holy Spirit impact in people's lives. I regularly have pastors come tell me, you're more influential in my church than I am. And I love that. That's what the pastor says, not me. I'm like, dude, right. I'm worried about that. He's like, no. I love it. It's great because what the culture you're sowing into our church is transforming our church more than I ever thought was possible. Regularly hear stuff like that. And so there's a lot of fruit. We don't focus on that because the fruit is the fruit. Like it's the byproduct, but for us, it's the family, it's the relationship, it's the kingdom adventure we're on. But if you turn around and you look in the rearview mirror, there's an awful lot back there, if that makes sense.
I think, Ryan, you'd asked about like, how does this make sense strategically? Or like, didn't these guys just stumble on some random thing? But I think the play and the family elements that we mentioned before partly explain the success that Putty's mentioning with numbers. Like, I think it's actually because we haven't defined any of these things as like the goalposts that we are going past some of the goalposts. Like we're just playing and that gives us freedom to experiment or to throw the thing away or to completely change what it is. I think that a lot of people set out with a predefined notion of where they're going. And that precludes a lot of God's grace that happens when families can go on journeys.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really powerful about just us as a team, and I don't know how it fully fits into what you're going at with kind of the relational end, but like we don't really have like we're trying to get to this many students, we're trying to get to this many sites. You know, we really, I feel like, have a humble thing where like we feel like we're right about things, but like we know we could be wrong. We never really have fought for anyone to see us to be right. You know, we've said this is how we see it. We feel like there's fruit on it, and we shared it. You know, I mean, we're a product that you have to pay for to get. You know, like it's not. There's some aspects of you could relate to us, you know, and join our social media network and read some free articles, and you could see some fun, you know, things there and there. But by and large, soccer is something you have to pay for. But we've always maintained a stance of like, yeah, this is how we see it. You're free to disagree. It's okay. You know, we don't think we're the rightest person. We don't really have this goal that we're trying to get the whole church to see it like us. We know we never will, you know. We're always trying to find a new way, a better way to do it. I mean, Putty is one of the most humble people I know, where, I mean, I can go to him about, you know, the product that he grew, and I'm largely maybe taking, you know, care of maybe the content in it and be like, hey, I think we're doing this wrong. We should be doing it this way. And he'll be like, yeah, I think you're right. And we'll change. You know, we're adaptable. We don't think we're not trying to get anywhere. I think we have a very humble side of, we know we've stumbled across something that's beautiful, but like we know it needs to change. We know it needs to grow. We are always trying to improve it. We know we need to get wiser. We know we need to get smarter. We're open to feedback and all that. So I think part of it, we're just flexible. We don't think we've arrived, and we're open to feedback. But there's no goal, you know, we're just always trying to just get better and improve.
I think what's very interesting from my point of view, listening, is, you know, the constant thing that I keep going is, you have a purpose, but you've not set a destination. In other words, we achieve this and we achieve it and it's over. You know, we have a creative purpose to advance the kingdom. And we're going to be flexible with however that looks. But in saying all that, I think for me, listening to this, the most beautiful thing that I hear is your unique friendship and constant. I've heard this constant, and I will tell you in just a minute why this is so important for me personally. I've heard the constant terminology of family. And your DNA of family is attached to those things. And so I go back to what you had said earlier about how people may be standoffish to begin with, but if there's this longing for family, even though they're perplexed, they eventually, you know, kind of come forward. Why? There's others that just won't. And the reality is, hey, we're not where you're supposed to be, because there just are those individuals. But one of the things that we say a lot, and thankfully we're moving past the motto, and we're actually seeing this develop more and more and more, is we say kingdom is family. Kingdom is family. And the reason we say that, we say the only way that you'll ever view another person as family, a part of the kingdom, is the kingdom has to be greater than culture. In other words, my white culture can't be greater than the kingdom. Black culture can't be greater than the kingdom. Hispanic, Asian, Native American can't be greater than the kingdom. The kingdom is greater than culture. So it's why I can look at someone who looks different than me, acts different than me, functions different than me, and yet they be family. And that family is part of the kingdom, and we can grow in that. So when you guys are saying this, my spirit, man, is just leaping, because this is where our heart is in this. But I do want to ask this question, because you do have this unique situation that's happening, especially in the United States, where there seems to be a constant redefining of God and families. You know, we have a television show that I think it's off the air now, but it was very popular one time, called Modern Family. And they redefined the structure of family and stuff and everything. So why do you feel like beyond your relationships as individuals yourself, why do you feel like family is so important in the kingdom?
Yeah, I think I'd like to add something in that. You had mentioned like the challenge maybe of my wife coming back from Paris to the United States and cultural things like that. And I think Daniel and Putty had mentioned, this outsider experience of having grown up in China. And like, I've certainly felt like an outsider, in my own country for a long time. But I feel like I just gave up at some point. I'm just like trying to fit in culturally, like that ship has sailed. But I came to understand why it doesn't matter, because like all this culture stuff, which is great and like a wonderful human thing, it is living at kind of a higher, thin layer really of who we are. And underneath that, like that's where love lives. That's where family's defined. That's where the kingdom lives. And it's like, so if I can't really vibe with whatever your culture is, like that's living up here. But what I found is like, it doesn't really matter where you go. Like maybe the words you have to use are different, but every human being responds to love. And love is not something that just lives in words, but like it lives in the kingdom of God, and that's just a fundamental part of who God is, which can't be redefined. And it lives underneath and is more powerful than all these cultural things. So like the idea of trying to control culture or win it or being compatible with it or whatever is missing the point. We should be present in culture and so on. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm just like the place where you win, where the battle actually is, and the thing that you actually have to win is beneath and transcends all of it.
Yeah, I think it's super good, Andrew. I think, to me, to just kind of take the keep running that thought forward a little bit, I hear the idea of culture like a lot. It's like one of those words in leadership right now, and like, it's fine. Like everybody goes through cycles and there is a lot of value in culture. Honestly, I sometimes even help churches develop the culture they want to develop. But I think sometimes like, we can like culture is actually only helpful to the extent that it helps you jumpstart relationship, I think. Like culture is like it helps the two of you find a bridge that you can cross to meet each other on, but it's the person to person connection that I think has value, not the culture itself so much. And so I think that idea of like person to person connection is actually the real thing. And I think that's the thing that like, I don't know that we've ever sat down and articulated this, but there are like some probably quote unquote rules that we follow in the context of our relationship. Like one of them is that like, I don't know if I know another group that has so little control in the balance. Like none of us will ever try to influence other people, like one another at all. Like, like sometimes we'll bring up an idea or something, but like, I don't know if I have ever had a conversation with any of the three of these where I've ever had the thought, I think they're trying to get me to do this or make that choice. Zero, like over 25 years. Like, I don't think it's ever happened. And that's not to say that we don't sometimes challenge each other and we don't do those things. We do, but like, the attempt of like, I'm going to influence you, it's just not here. Yep. Ego, like I you've heard us talk about competitiveness. Like there's just not a lot of ego here. I don't think like objectively, I think I can say that. And I think if that were to begin to happen, that's the kind of thing where we'd actually push each other a little bit on it. And we do have the kind of relationship. Like I have no doubt that my brother would come to me and be like, Putty, you're getting a little full of yourself. Like you're reading your own press too much. Like he would do that. Like I know he's nodding. He would do that. And I would actually listen because he calls me out on things. And because there's no ego, I do listen. Because I'm like, dude, that guy hears the Lord better than I do most of the time, I think. And I'll say the same thing for Andrew. And Tim, I think, does too, except he just delivers it different. He'll do it with a laugh and a smile, and I'll be like, ha ha, oh, you're right. But what happens is some of those things, I think, create the space where it's person-to-person connection. Like, I can have the most real and honest conversation with any of these people without fear, because I know there's no ego, because I know there's no manipulation, because I know there's none of those things. And I think the reason why that is so important is, man, that's what God's like. That's what the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are doing. They're living in family, and they're doing relationship with no ego, with no manipulation, with tons of fun and curiosity and adventure. Like, I actually think the reason it matters so much is it actually ties into our human identity. It's the imaging of God thing, which like happens with us individually, but it also happens between us. And we get to sort of dance the same kind of dance that God does. And when we do that, we actually image him. And that's why there's so much fruit and so much power, but it doesn't require a lot of effort, because God doesn't have to work hard to be God. Like, he's just being God, and the rest sort of follows. Yeah. So to me, that's what a lot of it's about.
Yeah. One thing I want to comment to with that, it's something that's kind of been in my head, Ryan, is like, if people would see us in the context of ministry, like they'd almost be like, whoa, maybe sometimes they're a little too loose. Like just because like Tim does this and like Putty does this, I mean, we deal with some really intense spiritual situations. It's not uncommon for us to have Holy Spirit moments where a lot of people are winding up on the floor. It's not uncommon for me. Not uncommon for me to do a really intense deliverance where literally a spirit is manifesting and, like swearing at me and stuff like that. Like, we see some really intense moments in ministry. But we intentionally, we never really laugh at people. Like I know the nature of humor, it's often critical, but like if there's going to be a joke, it's going to be on me. Like we actually try to keep a really high level of levity around it and jokes and fun and stuff like that. I intentionally do that because I feel like if you don't have that atmosphere, you often will go into some weird kind of religious spirit on it and stuff like that. And so, yeah, we'll spend the time making the jokes. We'll spend the time laughing. We'll spend the time smiling. Well, I think we do a very good job with professionalism, but like, yeah, we know that not everything's going to be perfect, and we're totally okay with that. So people would look at us and then say, oh, they're so loose. They're so stuff like that. But when we get together with friends, like, we don't really think about this because I think we just do it organically. We actually have a ton of, I'd say, integrity. Like, none of these guys really ever swear or use foul language, like, ever. Rarely do we ever go even borderline into like gossip or anything like that. I mean, every once in a while somebody makes you mad, but it's not like, let's just really rip into somebody. Let's all tear some dude down. Yeah, this dude's the worst, something like that. Like it's weird when we have fun, we actually, and we make jokes and stuff like that, but we actually like don't deviate into like a lot of things that like, sometimes like when you hang out with somebody the first time, like you kind of get the real them, kind of a thing. And then you realize like, oh, okay. Like, I appreciate that we're getting authentic and kind of we're putting our truest self out there, but also you see some stuff that's just not great. They start gossiping, they get really negative, kind of a thing. They start using language that maybe is a little bit more colorful, sort of thing that I don't think is always appropriate or something like that. Like, we actually don't do that. And we don't intentionally do it. And we know, like, if somebody did say something, I probably would be like, whoa, like, dude, like, ease up, kind of a thing. So it's really interesting that, like, in ministry, we'd look loose, but actually in our friendship, I'd say we're actually very tight. Like, we keep really kind of high standards of each other, but it's very unintentional. Like, it doesn't feel religious, but we know, to me, like, I do it. I don't know why they don't do it. I know because it protects the environment. It keeps it free. It keeps it fun. And there isn't this like, oh, like my conscience is a little violated because we're stepping into talking about stuff that doesn't quite feel right. kind of a thing. It almost protects the environment and the relationships. I'd say we're honest, but there's kind of a balance to me of always like being 100% honest and keeping good integrity. Like if you just want to like get around with your friends and rip into people and lick each other's wounds, like that could feel authentic, but that's not beneficial to anybody, kind of a thing. But we do keep kind of a higher standard of friendship, although it feels very unintentional when we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think an underrated side of integrity, I'm just realizing this now, but a lot of integrity comes down to how much you value yourself. Like if I'm going to like speak and use bad language, really the first reason I need to not do that is because it reflects on me and I'm coloring my life in a bad way, and really one of the most powerful reasons that I can believe that I have value is because my family tells me so, and because I've got these 3 people in my life who communicate that I have high value, it's easy for me to remember that I have high value and should speak that way. And I think that carries out into ministry and into other people too.
Yeah, if I could just add one thought, which is kind of piggybacking off of what a couple of you said. One, the question of why is family so important right now? Putty mentioned the idea of identity, and I do think that it's a family is so central to what Christianity is. God describes himself as a father. That's a family role. You can't really be a Christian without joining a family. And if you relate to him as father, then you are part of the family. And then, of course, that also relates to your identity as a son or daughter, so who you are in Christ. And then, I think that, and that's so important. Like Andrew said, the environment you're in, it reminds you of who you are. And I think that that's really the launching point for bearing fruit. It's the launching point for any outward expression or ministry or mission, is having that security, having that firm establishment in your identity and who you are. And that's what family is for. Family is like the base. It's like the foundation. It's like the grounding point, and everything else kind of grows out of that. But without that, you're just so easily, tossed around. Like Andrew said, like if you don't have family around you to reaffirm your value, it's really easy to lose sight of that. And if all you have is yourself trying to tell you that, it's very difficult. So
that even connects to some of the Daniel and Putty, I think, mentioned like intense ministry situations, or other times when things are just heavy or difficult or intense or something. But if you don't have, if in your mind it's not just about family, it ends up becoming about the outcome in the situation. And when you need like a certain kind of ministry outcome, you've already taken that responsibility upon yourself and you've come into an unhealthy place. And then you tend towards burnout or something like that. But if you stay in the place where family defines what success is, like your family doesn't fail if you fail to like cast out that spirit or have a good ministry outcome. Like you've already won, and that's the only place that you can be safe.
Yeah.
And it's the only place where you can like remain in ministry or in whatever long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think too, like some of this, I think we've just been fortunate enough that God has graced us with something that we've been able to sort of like just live out, like, God's good. I think I can speak for Andrew and myself, at least. I don't know, Dan and Tim, if you feel the same way, but, Andrew and I, again, to try and like, we don't advertise this because it's like not the kind of thing we like to lead with. But the truth is that like both of us essentially climbed to the top of the mountain in some very intense and difficult things to do. I have a PhD in theoretical quantum physics. My understanding is that that's the most difficult degree in the world to get. And I was working with, scientists that are at the top of the game, Nobel Prize type people. And I've been to the top of the mountain of accomplishment. Andrew was an engineer at Facebook and Google. I mean, like, talk about top companies. Like, you don't get higher than that. There is no, like, you accomplish more than this. So, like, I've been there. It's okay. It's nothing compared to this. Like, no level of accomplishment fills anything compared to the type of relationships that the four of us are able to maintain, and the sense of family, like not even close, like not even 10%, And so I think sometimes it's easy to look at those things and misunderstand what they're going to give us. We all know we're supposed to like make some valuable contribution in the world. Like that's wired into us. Like God has made us to do that. But I think we like confuse the means and the ends and those kinds of things. And we think that like, if I do that, that'll fill this family hole that I feel. And the truth is it's the other way around. Like it's the family thing that all that grows out of. And it's when and it also makes all of it not feel nearly as important,
Yeah.
So yeah.
One time I watched Tim eat 2 Chipotle burritos. It's the greatest accomplishment I've ever seen a human being do.
Yeah, I was about to say, Putty, I don't really relate to that, as I have not climbed to the top of any mountains. But thank you, Dan, for an example of some accomplishment I do have. That's really helpful. But
I couldn't think of something. I don't think I've ever seen him eat 2 Chipotle burritos, but I just wanted to make a joke like that.
Yeah. But I actually, that sparked a thought, and it illustrates really well some of the dynamic we have, and what you're saying, Putty, like really understanding what is and isn't valuable. Because to me there is a little bit of on paper our lives actually look really different. What Putty just said, what he achieved in his academic career, I never even finished college, and you wouldn't think that a doctorate in physics and a college dropout would have a lot in common, or end up being best friends, but that kind of thing just isn't, it's just not what we value, right, in each other. It's not like we look for that. And so,
yeah. And I want to go on the record, and I think, Tim, you'll say that this is probably actually true. I'm not convinced I'm any smarter than you are. Like, ultimately, like I'm like, there's a lot of times where I'm like, man, Tim's really smart. I don't have anything on him. He's got it, So like, I think I say that to say this. My guess would be, Dan and Tim, that you don't feel a sense that we think we're great because we got to some top of some mountain. Like we're just like, whatever, doesn't matter at all. It's nothing. Like it's really not a thing. I don't know. Maybe you would.
Well,
maybe
there was.
I am certain that if you do feel that way, that you're just confused.
I don't know. I feel like most of my professional experience has been a very long joke.
Well, I was just sitting here feeling like, well, I use Facebook and Google, so I can relate to that to a degree. And I do have one up on Putty. I do know what quantum leap is, so he doesn't know that. Although I will say, with Tim having a cat in the background, not finishing college, that is an epic picture of the cat in the background. That kind of goes together. Not finishing college, cat in the background.
Oh yeah, you bet.
But the accomplishment of 2 Chipotle burritos, that is
that's
well
right.
done.
It's at least noteworthy.
Yeah, I have a good friend who done the same thing. He's super skinny. I'm not. And I tell him constantly, I love him, but there are many days I do not like him. I can sniff a burrito and gain weight, and he chokes 2 of those down without anything. Life is definitely not fair at times, but
That's right.
Nevertheless, gentlemen, you guys, we're going to have to do this again. Because I really enjoy listening to what you're sharing. What I hear in this is just authentic relationships, but I hear the authenticity in the things that you're actually saying. You're not giving me the cheap church hype version. This is what we do, and this is how we do it. And if you do this, you'll grow from 10 members to 1,000 members. I'm not getting that. And I, for one, sincerely appreciate that. So we're going to have to set something else up in the future. I may have to go to Phoenix Online and try to up my ante a little bit and make myself feel a little bit better sitting in the room with Putty and Andrew. But nevertheless, just joking in that. But I got a feeling that I may lean a little bit to Daniel and Tim's world a little bit on that side of it, because, the intelligence side of it, I just want to say that, I honor you guys greatly.
It's overrated, but that's nothing wrong with it. It's overrated. Man, like, America worships intelligence.
Oh, yes.
At one point, I actually asked the Lord, I said, Lord, how important is intelligence? Because if it really matters, it's just pretty unfair, because you have no control over your intelligence. It's just something you're given or you're not given, and if that is somehow connected to anything that actually matters, then God's made the world kind of cruel, And he told me, here, I'll just throw this in there real quick, right? He said, Putty, I want you to think about Peter and I want you to think about Paul. And I'm like, okay, Peter, not particularly impressive guy, puts in his mouth half the time. At one point, Jesus actually calls him Satan. I mean, it's like Peter's not got a lot going on upstairs all the time. And then you have Paul on the other guy who's he went to Harvard, more or less, the Jewish Harvard of the day. And so I'm thinking about Peter and Paul. I'm like, okay, Lord. And he goes, you know what? I needed Peter because Paul wouldn't have done the day of Pentecost. Mm. Holy Spirit falls, all of this is happening. Somebody's got to stand up on the balcony and go, I don't know what's going on, but that doesn't bother me because I never know what's going on. And preach a sermon and 3,000 people get saved and the church gets born. You need a Peter for the day of Pentecost. But you also need a Paul to write most of the New Testament, because you need that too. So I'm convinced, honestly, that the intelligence thing is overrated. If you have it, it's something you have to steward with God. If you don't have it, it's something God can use without you having it. It actually doesn't matter all that much. It's about the way God wants to use you, and don't get caught up in the rest of it. Overrated.
That's for sure. I think I definitely have it. It's just in areas yet to be determined. But, I definitely got it somewhere because I did not do well in English, which you can tell by the sound of my voice.
Neither did Putty. Putty did terrible in English, actually.
Yeah,
and our dad's an editor.
Well, I had to be tutored, and I'm an author. So I constantly, to this day, give my high school counselor something to consider. I mean, what can you say? I was speaking over a radio in Nicaragua one time, and I said, man, my high school counselor never saw this one coming. So there's little moments in life that you get to laugh and smile. And gentlemen, I've enjoyed my time with you guys so much. I do want to carry this on into the future sometime soon and carry this further. And hopefully I'll get out to Illinois once the governor there decides to let people live again. And we get to experience life. But at least grab a cup of coffee with you guys and maybe some paintball or, something where I can at least hunker down and hide. My days of running are very limited these days, but nevertheless. So I appreciate it so much. What I'd like to do is, how can our listeners and those that's watched this, how can they learn more about the ministry?
Well, I suppose it'd probably be easiest would be to look up School of Kingdom Ministry. I think if you just type that into Google, it's probably the top hit.
Schoolofkingdomministry.org is the website. All one word, lowercase, schoolofkingdomministry.org.
There we go. Thank you for being precise and accurate, Tim.
That's part of my job.
This is one of the things Tim brings to the circle here is he's going to get it right.
I love it. I love the friendship. I love the laughter. Life's too short not to laugh at the expense of others.
Yes.
Find someone to laugh at. If you can't find anybody to laugh at, go to Walmart at midnight. It won't take long. And if you still can't find anybody to laugh at, look in the mirror. You're probably that person for someone else. Nevertheless, learn to laugh a little. So it's good. But I appreciate everybody listening to the Blacksmith Chronicles podcast. We hope that you are challenged, encouraged, and equipped in every aspect of this particular episode. We want to encourage you to share it. Make sure that everybody hears this or sees the YouTube video. Share it, subscribe, give us our feedback, rate and review, and all that good stuff. Make sure to look up the ministry of these gentlemen and what they're doing out of Illinois and beyond and everything that do. We love you and we bless you all in the name of Jesus.
Thank you for listening to the Blacksmith Chronicles podcast. It is our prayer that this episode challenged you, encouraged you, and equipped you for the advancement of the kingdom of God. For more episodes or ways that you can partner with Ryan Janssen Ministries, please go to www.ryanjohnson.us or email us directly at info@ryanjohnson.us. Please join us again soon for another episode of the Blacksmith Chronicles.